Bunch of people are walking in. It's all good. Hey, what do you, I'm trying to like see the screen as to who's here right now. And maybe you can help me with this. So I can see a couple commissioners, we're all here. But can I blow a screen up in a different way or?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so can you help me out here that, let me get my video on, okay? I think I'm good right on this end. Okay, but I don't have council chambers right now. You're my tech guy, man. I'm depending on you. Okay?
Are you able to see him now?
Yeah, I got all that stuff. Yeah, I'm fine.
We'll take roll call in a minute. You want to know who's in the audience or what?
Yeah, Commissioner Fournette, Joe Fatizzi's in the audience.
I can't quite, I don't know what you're asking.
I'm not asking anything.
Okay.
Roll call is good.
Well, it is 6:30 and we will call this meeting to order. It's not an official, well, it's a special planning commission meeting. And the date is May 27th. The time is 6:30. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and
with
justice for all.
justice.
Had to wait for the lag. Okay, roll call. Gotta put these on. Commissioner Huggins. That would be no. Commissioner DeVoyne's called in, he won't make it. Commissioner Freiberger,
Present.
Commissioner Fatizzi is online.
Present.
Commissioner Jasper,
Present.
Commissioner Fournette, present. And Commissioner Sexton called in, won't make it. Okay, I guess I need to be over here. General public comment. Please keep comments to 3 minutes or less because state law prohibits the use of city facilities for the purpose of supporting or opposing a campaign or ballot proposition. We respectfully request that public comment not make reference to such matters. Written comments will be accepted by letter or via email to nmcgowan@sedro-woolley.gov. Attention public comments until 4:30 p.m. the day before the meeting. Do we have any general comments?
Staff did not receive any public comments.
Okay. Well then, that was opened at 6:32 and closed at 6:32. Public hearings, there won't be. Unfinished business, none. New business, comprehensive plan draft, climate element. Did you want to talk about your rules of the road first, or?
We'll go ahead and save that until after the
Or
new
after,
business
okay.
item ends.
Okay. I'm sorry, go
Okay.
ahead.
Good evening. This is Tom Glover, Community Development Director. So with us tonight are our team members from Facet who will be going through the climate element of the comp plan. This is the draft element. This is new this time around. We've talked about this before. new this time, and they can tell you a little bit more about this, but they have met with the action committee on this, and I guess I'll turn it over to you guys then. So, Alexandra, okay.
Oh, thank you. Good evening. Oh, maybe. Hi, I'm Alexandra Plum. I'm an environmental planner with Facet. Woody, would you turn the PowerPoint on? Thank you. So thank you all. Tonight we're here to talk to you about the draft climate element. So the agenda tonight, we're going to give you an overview of House Bill 1181. Next slide, please. Give you an overview of the requirements of the resilience sub-element and the greenhouse gas emissions reduction sub-element, and then review any goals and policies and have discussions about any that you may have questions about. Next slide. So as Tom brought up, the comprehensive plan is broken down into a number of elements. So the climate element is going to be a new element this time around, and then we will have a resiliency and greenhouse gas emissions reduction sub-element. Next slide. So the reason that we are here to discuss this with you tonight is that House Bill 1181 was enacted by Washington State in 2023. It requires the integration of a new climate element and resiliency sub-element that has an emphasis on climate resiliency, greenhouse gas emissions reduction, hazard mitigation, and advancing environmental justice. Next slide. So for 11 of the state's fastest growing counties and their cities with a population that's greater than 6,000 as of April 1st, 2021, the House Bill 1181 also requires those jurisdictions to have a greenhouse gas emissions reduction sub-element. So this applies to Skagit County and the city of Sedro-Woolley. Next slide.
Can we slow it down for 1 second here?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Okay, well, you're just going through your presentation, and I get it. And I appreciate that, by the way. This is so new. We all knew it. We knew it was coming our way. So at this particular point, we just need to be compliant with what the state has. And let's sit back right now and evaluate before we put this into, and this is what's just simply going to happen. Okay, we know it needs to be one of our elements. And if you could take every farting cow in Skagit County, okay, and that's where that goes. Let's just sit back and before we craft this, okay, I don't think it's going to be effective at all. And I'm going to just get out there right now. No, I don't know how anybody could even be effective with these different guidelines. That yes, it came from the state, it came from Jay Inslee, it came from a whole bunch of different things. But I'm telling you right now, I don't know how we could accommodate this stuff. So I didn't mean to disrupt you, but let's sit back and when we craft it, it's like, we're just going to be compliant. Okay, and that's all. So I just want to make sure that the city of Sedro-Woolley is compliant, and that's just where we're going to go from here, because this is so new as far as how these different elements work. And I got to tell you, yeah, I'm just interested myself to see how, like I said, every farting cow in Skagit County is going to change the climate.
Let's
So-
let's continue with the presentation and have you go through it, and let's hold questions and comments until the end, please.
By the way, I'm apologizing.
That's
Anyway,
okay.
it's all good.
Thank you.
You.
So I just want to go back to the community engagement that we've had so far. So as a part of the Commerce Guidance, they recommended to form a climate policy advisory team. So we had 3 meetings with the Climate Policy Advisory Team. It included a variety of members, including local businesses, Skagit Council of Governments, Washington State DOT, the tribes, school district, Chamber of Commerce, and Skagit PUD, as well as other members. We also had 2 community surveys. So we put out a survey for climate impacts and household travel. We received 81 responses for the climate impacts survey and 128 responses for the household travel survey. And then, as some of the Planning Commission members know, we held a
Was that shared with anybody? Because I haven't seen any of that.
I believe it was distributed from city staff. We had mailers. It was on the website. It was, I think we even had physical posters or physical flyers anyways.
We started initial discovery, I want to say back in July. Okay, but I haven't seen any feedback on
We can,
climate change.
we can provide
Okay.
you the results of the survey if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great to see. Yeah.
Okay. I think they're on the
Curious
website as
myself.
well.
Check out a website. Okay. What's up? And what website would that be?
The city's website or a comprehensive plan
Website.
page.
Yeah, I look at the city's website all the time. Anyway.
So we held a community meeting on vehicle miles traveled to discuss strategies with the community as well, which also informed revisions to the goals and policies that you're seeing today. Next slide, please. So here you'll see the requirements set by Commerce for what the resilience sub-element is required to contain. So the goals and policies must include requirement 1, which is to address natural hazards created or aggravated by climate change. Requirement 2, identify, protect, and enhance natural areas to foster climate resilience. And then requirement 3, identify, protect, and enhance community resilience to climate impacts, including social, economic, and built environment factors. Next slide, please. So because this is a new element, Commerce put out specific guidance for how to create the climate element or the resilience sub-element, which is a part of the climate element. So step 1 was to explore the climate impacts. Step 2, audit the plan and policies. Step 3, assess vulnerability and risk. And step 4, they offered 3 different pathways that you could choose from. So pathway 1 was to select or adapt existing goals and policies. Pathway 2 was to adopt new goals and policies, or pathway 3 was update and adopt a hazard mitigation plan. You could also do more than one of those pathways. So we chose to do pathway 1 and 2. So there's adaptations to existing policies to better enhance resiliency to climate-related impacts, but then there's also the climate element, which is entirely new goals and policies. And then step 5 was to integrate those goals and policies into the climate element and the plan overall. Next slide, please. So just to go back on the work that we've done to date, so step 1 was to explore climate impacts. So that's what we did here. So these are identified climate hazards. So those included drought, extreme heat, extreme precipitation, flooding, reduced snowpack, and wildfire. And so those were calculated based on the projections from the University of Washington Climate Impacts Group Climate Mapping for a Resilient Washington tool, as well as local documents informed those relevancies. And that's not saying that you're going to have impacts to all assets. These are just something that we started as an evaluation, and then individual asset hazard pairings were completed. And we'll talk about that next. Next slide, please. So part of the climate guidance prepared from Commerce is that you would take those individual asset and hazard pairings and determine what the exposure and sensitivity is, which essentially becomes potential impact, and pair that with the adaptive capacity of individual assets to establish what the vulnerability would be. Next slide. So here's a visual of what that looks like. So on the left-hand side, you'll see what's sensitivity in a high, medium, low, and then adaptive capacity of the assets. So adaptive capacity low would essentially mean that it's like a high cost in order to adapt that to a climate-related hazard. A low or a high adaptive capacity would something that adapts fairly easily at a low cost. So as you can see here, if you have a high sensitivity paired with a low adaptive capacity, that then becomes a high vulnerability in this matrix. Next slide, please. And so once we established what the vulnerabilities were of specific assets, you would then take any asset hazard pairing that has a medium vulnerability or higher and determine what the composite risk ranking would be. So that was done by establishing what the probability of a climate impact would be and then the magnitude of that pairing to establish what the composite risk ranking would be. And then we have, next slide please, a visual of what that looks like as well. So if you have a high magnitude paired with a high probability, that then becomes a high risk. Next slide. So just to give you a preface of what the table looks like on this next slide, Commerce requires that you establish whether or not you're going to take action or accept risk. And what that means is by take action is that you're going to address the risks impacts with comprehensive plan policies. Accept risk would just mean that you are going to monitor that over time and not address it with a specific policy strategy or action in this update. Next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of what we evaluated with the climate workbook, which is a large Excel document that we can provide to you all. So assets are on the left and they're broken down by sector. So that includes agriculture, buildings and energy, cultural resources and practices, economic development, ecosystems, emergency management, and human health. So as you can see here, the relevant priority climate hazards are on the top. So that included extreme precipitation, flooding, extreme heat, drought, reduced snowpack, and wildfire. So generally speaking, anything that had a high composite risk ranking, we determined should take action. And then if it was a low composite risk ranking, we generally accepted the risk. And then medium was a variation of whether or not you take risk. Next
Young
slide.
lady, can I, before you go to the next slide,
Sure.
I'm getting a little bit irritated right now. I'm telling you why. You have no idea what Skagit County, and we have volcanoes, Mount Baker, in our backyard is all about. So I'm looking at your spreadsheets and your analysis here. I'm just going to get this on the record right now. Okay. That is not what we have as far as our risks go. I've had this conversation with the mayor. Okay. I feel very strongly about this. We got this thing called the Skagit River. We got this thing called Mount Baker. Okay. That does not go into anything that you have here.
Joe, if we, I need to, let's have her finish the presentation first, please.
Anyway, that's fine.
Next slide, please. So this is the rest of the assets that we evaluated. So that included transportation, waste management, water resources, and zoning and development. Next slide, please. So House Bill 1181 requires that you include at least one climate resilience goal and supportive policy for each climate exacerbated hazard that's relevant to Sedro-Woolley. So the proposed goals and policies that you're seeing in the draft element were adapted from the Commerce Climate Policy Explorer, but also included local plans because we wanted to make sure to include those. So they included specific goals and policies that relate to the Skagit PUD strategic plan, as well as the 2024 water system plan, and then the Skagit County multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. Next slide. So the general themes of the goals and policies included education and technical expertise for staff, protecting the well-being, community health and well-being, encouraging sustainable building construction, establishing resilient land use patterns, protecting and preserving water quality and quantity, encouraging effective energy conservation and recycling measures, and then also encouraging local agricultural economy resiliency and resiliency of cultural resources and practices. Next slide. Additional themes included encouraging land conservation for at-risk properties, protecting and adapting critical infrastructure, particularly those that are identified in the hazard mitigation plan, prioritizing resiliency of the local transportation system, including infrastructure, routes, and travel modes. That was identified as a priority in the survey, particularly for the household travel survey and the climate impact survey. Ensuring protection and restoration of streams to achieve healthy watersheds, and then incentivizing urban tree canopy and enhancement. Next slide. And then I'll pass it to Heidi.
All right. I hope I might have to back this up a little. Sorry. It is. Especially because I got to get to the reader part of my glasses, so I'm gonna throw my neck out. Exactly. Hi, everybody. Heidi Roos with Kimley Horn. We are a subconsultant to Facet. Glad to be here. All right, next slide. So again, as Alex said, there is a mandatory greenhouse gas emission reduction sub-element due to the size of your population. And again, there's a definition here of the GHG emissions mitigation, which are actions taken to reduce or, eliminate the greenhouse gas present and future in order to reduce the rate and extent of climate change. Next slide. So Commerce gave us guidance, very similarly to the resilience sub-element. There are a number of pathways, including conducting a GHG emissions estimate, conducting a vehicle miles traveled study, and creating a GHG emissions inventory. And all of them lead to the same place, which is to integrate goals and policies into the comprehensive plan that help the state make its commitments. And so that for those that it is mandatory, it is recommended pursuing pathway 3, which is what we did. Next slide. So in getting to the greenhouse gas emission reduction sub-element, we needed to determine the scope, scale, and to really identify all local emission sources. Not an easy task. Greenhouse gases come from a lot of intentional and some unintentional things that people do and engage in, and it is always a challenge to decide kind of setting our boundaries as to what we're going to include. So we took a very, I think, practical look at what we thought would be the major sources. Energy, obviously, whether that's consumed in buildings, whether that's consumed by vehicles, both what the city owns and operates, and really the majority of it is what the citizens do, and business. So we went through that with the help of city staff, gathered all that information to the best of our ability. It really is just an estimate the first time you do it. We set emissions reduction targets, and I know, and I'm sure Joe's gonna wanna talk a lot about how aggressive one can really be, because let's pause for a moment. The city's role here is to influence a change in human behavior. You can't mandate it, regulate it, legislate it to be so. This is a challenge. You have very limited levers to get everybody in your community eventually to where the state needs you to be. And that's very much acknowledged by Commerce, by the county, by other cities. You're all in this together. And so it is a challenge, definitely, and we have some listed up there. That target setting is a challenge. You need to be in alignment, but not every community can get there as fast as other communities, especially when you look at communities as diverse as those here in Washington. So we developed some measures in the short, medium, and long term, we're still in the act of finishing that, I should say, of the implementation plan to achieve the targets. And then we're going to come back and integrate all those measures into the comprehensive plan. And a mandatory part of this from Commerce is to evaluate progress going forward. So this is, you really have to kind of get that mindset of you're kicking off a process, right? It's not a product. It's not on this date exactly we're going to arrive here. It's very much a process. There are many other things happening. many of which benefit the city in getting to those goals, of which you have no influence over. There are some that are going to take a collective will, and we really do understand that and try to devise realistic, actionable measures. So we'll get to them, but there's a lot of data before we get there. And that steps us through the fourth step. Next slide, please. So I always just like to pause here a moment and talk about the difference between mitigation on the left side, which is really what I'm talking to you about, and adaptation, which is what Alex just talked to you about. And it's the old Venn diagram from high school science. Sorry, everybody, but I'm a nerd and I love Venn diagrams. And that red part in the middle is where certain actions can benefit both. Take urban forest. They help with adaptation. They can help stabilize banks, for example. They can help stabilize, levees. They also sequester carbon, right? So that's a really obvious one that does both mitigate and adapt. But let's look at clean energy, for example. That does nothing for adaptation to climate change that has already been set in motion by greenhouse gases, human-made or otherwise, that have already been set in motion. So we just like to remind everyone that they are not two sides of the same coin. They really are two different spheres that overlap with that middle part in the center there. So next slide, please. So climate mitigation, we've got the inventory results, and we will present those by sector. It's going to be heavy talking about vehicle miles traveled. So you'll hear me say VMT like it's a word. It kind of becomes one, because really that's, as in most communities, it is a big majority of the emissions that are quote unquote attributable to this town. And then we're going to roll out our strategies, the goals and policies, and the measures. Next slide, please. So here's the GHG emissions inventory results. We have them for 2 calendar years, 2021 and 2022. You will see, I think the interesting thing, the units here are large. These are metric tons of CO2 equivalent, because each gas has a different global warming potential. So we convert them to the equivalent of carbon dioxide. You will hear me say possibly decarbonization as a general term, but there are greenhouse gases that are not carbon-based. I do mean them almost interchangeably when I say GHGs. So these are massive amounts of emissions, very unlike other pollutants you might, if you've done any transportation planning, for example, be familiar with. I think the interesting part is more look at the percentages, and you will immediately notice that natural gas and transportation, they flip-flop. Again, that's going to depend on the accuracy of our models, but also the natural gas we got directly from consumption. So that's going to be a lot of weather-based. You're talking about natural gas used for creature comfort, hot water, but heating. And so in a cooler year, you're going to see that natural gas go up. So you've got a swing there of about 10%. From 55,000 metric tons to 61, for example. That is going to be weather-based and hard to predict. That's why we like to look at a couple of years rather than a single snapshot in time. But it is not unusual to have your transportation sector be anywhere from 35 to 45 to even 60%, depending of the total emissions. And so that's why the Commerce guidance will talk a lot about reducing VMT will reduce greenhouse gases. There's converting VMT to other sources, and that's kind of a two-pronged strategy. So we'll come back to that. Your electricity is somewhere around 13 to 16%, fairly steady in the grand scheme of things. Same thing with solid waste. We had no different data. And that's how the landfill deals with the gas that comes off of that. So I think the interesting thing, though, because each year had different, or could have different per capita population. So the good thing is, even though they kind of moved around between sectors, you'll notice you went from 10.86 metric tons per person down to 10.54 in 2022. That's a trend going in the right way. I mean, it's not a huge, reduction, and it could pop up in 2023. It really does do this, both when you start measuring something, you start getting a little better data, and also, again, with the natural gas in this community, and we've done a number of these now throughout the state, this is pretty high, and I think it just reflects the dependency that people have on natural gas as a fuel for creature comfort. I mean, you have some industry here too, and that could be tied to increased production, but we were not able to suss that out in the available data, for example. But so this didn't surprise me, but again, if we have any questions, I will entertain questions. I know, Joe, we want to get through this, but we can come back. So I did try to make them different colors. If this is the orange one you want to talk about, we can come back. Or if you have questions, I'll be more than happy to try to explain things.
When I was writing, you might have answered the question, because I blank out for a minute.
Yeah.
Why hasn't 2023 been counted yet? Did you address that?
Simply, we didn't need to.
Oh, you didn't need to.
Yeah, exactly. There will be a requirement to continue updating your emissions and really to look at this in, more or less 5-year increments. You don't want to go 5 years to go by. But simply when we started this, these were the requirements. Data can be hard to come by from the power company, for example. They will make sure we can't tie that to a particular customer, right? It's hard to even get it by zip code. And is the zip code your city and the outside, so it isn't as easy as just looking something up on the internet, but it's a small amount of effort, and I'd be happy to teach Ash how to do that. Not to throw him under the bus, he was great getting us data. Here I am nominating him, but we'd be very happy to show him that you could do 23, 24. I mean, we're already, very well into 25. So this can be replicated. We, again, tried to keep it fairly high level for that exact reason, and that it's an inventory that city staff can continue. But we just went with what was required to not bog us down, too much. But if that's something you'd like to see, we could return, not today, later with that, if Joe, if that was interest to you.
Thank you.
Okay, good question. All right.
May I ask a question? I enjoyed your vehicle miles traveled presentation about a month ago, and I was curious if Washington estimates greenhouse gases from wildfires. I've noticed after our listening to your talk, I went back and researched some states, such as California, do estimate that several years in the past, and I was curious if Washington State had that, because I didn't find it on any of their websites.
Yeah, great question. I do not believe the state has included that as, that's like predicting for a disaster, I think in California, it's become so evident that some part of the state is going to burn every year that they've decided to include it, whereas I think you all still have more of a fluctuation. It's an important part. It's a great question. And so, which is why when you really dig into, even though it's a decarbonization plan to zero, it's really to 95%. They understand there's going to be some you just can't capture, you just can't get away from, and stuff you can't control. So we say it's a net zero plan, but when you dig into the numbers, you're like, well, there's a little bit of residual, and I think that might be for things like that. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, great question.
One more.
Yes.
She made me think of something. Is water a GHG?
Steam can be a greenhouse gas. You're absolutely right. When produced in massive quantities, think cooling towers from power plants.
So just the river flowing through is not a GHG?
No.
Okay.
No. Great question. But naturally occurring water, again, once you treat it, you have electricity to pump it and treat it. Waste and sewage have their own off-gassing, let's put that politely,
Well, that's the solid waste part. But
Solid waste
yeah.
is landfill.
That's
That is-
landfill. Oh,
Yeah,
got
I'm
it.
sorry. That is
Not
going
solid
into a landfill. Now, landfill gases are made, many years in the future. What you deposit today doesn't start breaking down in your typical landfill. Totally depends on design and cover, and I don't want to bore you. I could nerd out, and I won't. And that'll start off-gassing 5, 10, 15 years and pretty much play out over 20 years. So that is a kind of a misnomer when we say in 2021, 6,561. It's really the community threw away enough trash that will eventually release that. So there's a time dependency in certain things. The electricity, natural gas, and transportation is combusted now and released at the time of use. So, great.
Do we have a solid waste place in Sedro-Woolley?
No, this is, I believe you truck it out to county, so we used landfills.
That it all goes to Oregon or something, doesn't it?
Off the top of my head, sir, I cannot remember. I could look that up.
Because it says this is what we created in Sedro-Woolley, so.
Yeah,
anyway.
it's
We shipped it somewhere else,
Yeah,
though, so we
yes.
got rid of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's going to happen somewhere else, but this is a global phenomena. So it's not something you can just move over that imaginary yellow dash line and say it's not yours anymore. So that's the guidance and the general accounting structure of GHGs.
So something that's going to be interesting to see in the coming years, I was thinking 2021 and 2022 are kind of unfortunate that we got data from those years because I think, of course, it's just a guess, that what you're seeing, why it was higher in 21 is we were coming out of the pandemic there. People were still maybe at home using more things. So, it's great if it's lowering due to other causes, but that may have been kind of an artificially, an outlier a bit. And so, as we get back more to normalcy, it'll be interesting to see if we actually are reducing those things with new policies in place.
Excellent line of questioning. I mean, what did the pandemic do to all of this, right? Various states are ahead of you. Hawaii is much more aggressive in its targets to get to zero. On one hand, everyone was home. You're like, great, not driving cars, except that a lot of offices still ran the air conditioning and the heat because they didn't know nobody was there, right? They're kind of on auto and they kind of do their thing, and you kind of get to a point where you're like, why are we treating both spaces, right? So unless someone really manually went in and said, no one's coming to the office, you're all working remotely. So that's also why you can see a lot of flip-flop, is that people were, trying to figure it out, driving, not driving, hybrid, So some of this, going 4 or 5 points each way can just be, behavior, it can just be our ability to account for it. We really do want to look at longer trends before we really decide, this is or isn't working, so to speak. So great dialogue, but although I encourage questions, I also encourage us to move on. We got lots of data. All right, next slide, please. So here are the targets, remembering that solid waste is the lowest emissions ranking. That just means of your contribution. Heating, natural gas, that's really heating hot water, is highest. Includes barbecues. We don't care what it was used for, just natural gas. Second highest is transportation. Those two flip around, but let's, and third highest, should have gone lowest, third, second highest is electricity. It matches what we just showed you. So there needs to be some GHG emissions reduction targets set. Sorry, that got a little faint there at the top. Looked better on my laptop. You'll see they're not the same. So, 2030 is around the corner. It's, 4.5 years from now, 5.5 to the end of 2030. So the idea is to, where we think it's going to be easiest, to set a little more aggressive target. Electricity, let's talk about that. The grid is greening with really, that's, a bad term, but the utilities are under a mandate to include more renewables. So that number, 15% by 2030, 60% by 2040, that's in line with what the utility is doing, with really very little from you all. So that's the good news. That's the little icing on top, that with the state putting pressure on the utility to reduce its dependency on coal, increase renewables, right? They really need to get there. Doesn't mean that you all in local government don't have a role in it. Encouraging solar PV, encouraging, possibly better insulation, upgrading windows, whatever it is, right? But electricity, is really not where you need to focus. And it's pretty low down on your greenhouse gas emissions anyway, because the state of Washington has a lot of thermal power, water power, et cetera, right? So let's go down to solid waste also. Very small percent of the greenhouse emissions come from that. There are things landfills can do. And so this is also, again, if you think about bigger concept is, are people burning their trash? Well, maybe out in rural areas that's still permitted. Is that a good practice? Because you're releasing everything all at once. Well, if we're trucking it all to a landfill, what is the landfill doing with that gas? And believe it or not, it's a commodity, right? And you get to a point where it's actually economical to produce energy off of that gas that would otherwise just be released to the atmosphere. So there are options for technology. It can also be made into a fuel, a vehicle fuel. So there's actually ways at which, again, the landfill operators would take
Madam,
responsibility.
I'm going to
for
interrupt
that.
you right now. We don't have landfills in the city of Sedro-Woolley.
Right. Yeah. But
Right, so I
it's
get where you're going with a whole lot of this, but a
it's
lot of this
trash.
stuff doesn't apply
It's trash
to
produced by your
what this
citizens, Joe.
is
Sorry.
and what our capacities are in different things. So, and Tom, I apologize for interrupting, but no, we don't have landfills in the city of Sedro-Woolley.
I understand that. I acknowledge that. This is the trash produced by your citizens that are taken to a landfill. That's why it's still
Trash is
accountable.
produced all kinds of things, girlfriend. Yeah.
So heating is going to be heating and transportation, biggest contribution, and your biggest challenges. So you can see that there's less aggressive targets, giving you more time to hit that 2050. Just a modest 5 or 10% by 2030, 10 by 2040 on heating, and then 100% by 2050. Let's be honest, and I know, Joe, you're going to agree with me on this. I know we don't know how we're going to get there. You're talking about housing stock, building stock that is not at the end of its useful lifetime. In fact, has a useful life, time past 2050. Who's going to retrofit? Who's going to, all those appliances? Who's going to run all that electricity? Do you have the resiliency when you start, stressing the grid like that? So it isn't as easy with a magic wand of just switching from heating to, say, all electric appliances, et cetera. So this
There's
one's
no
going to
magic
take
wand.
some collective.
There's no magic wand.
Yeah,
All I can say is this. This is a 2 bottle of wine conversation. All I can say is this. We have to look at what we have factor-wise for the city of Sedro-Woolley, and 10-year comprehensive plans are a really, really big deal. So, and we're all on the same, listen, we're on the same team. All I'm saying is this, as I'm listening to the presentations, I'm being polite right now. We're all on the same team. So let's continue on, and we get what we need to do from our elements, and especially on that whole climate change thing, because I was confused myself as to how all that kind of stuff was going to go on, because it's like, how do you calculate something like that in a small little town like this? And yeah, and you're doing a really good job of bringing it together, but it's not reality. Let's keep going. We're good.
Yep.
No, we're
All
good.
right.
And I apologize.
No, it's fine. I've been doing this a long time, sir, and I agree with you. It's
We're
a
all good.
funny accounting system that we start attributing to, you're responsible, but you don't have the authority, right? And that is a frustrating place to be. But every community is in that same spot because the state doesn't have a magic wand to make its mandates either. So absolutely. So look, we're looking for a plan, just going to echo your words, that meets the requirements. We're not sure, everyone should know this in this room, I know the staff do, we're not sure that those target settings, that they're going to be okay with that. They may push back. You have very few arrows in your quiver, we understand that. And so we really did make a customized GHG plan, giving you all lots of time to ease yourself into this. And again, we got lots of great feedback on the public, in the public workshop that we did on both ideas and concerns, right? Fears and opportunities and all of that. So we're trying to get you some time to do that, realizing, everything we're saying here, we're not sure what Commerce is going to say. They haven't given us a prescription, and they could push back and say, we need more. And It's like housing allocation or anything else you do with commerce. It could be a negotiation. So we're putting our best foot collectively forward in what we think is both achievable, but not, and they are very, very clear about this in the guidance. The do nothing is unacceptable. You cannot just throw your hands up and say, I'm paraphrasing, that it's not our problem and someone else to do that. They are very clear about that. But other than that, this is all about getting there together in the collective while the individual responsibility rolls down to, folks on this call and in this room. So that's fully acknowledged, yeah. So transportation, there really is some levers there that a local jurisdiction can have in that. But it's really in an encourage and help guide, because you don't run a transit department. We understand that, and then we got some really good ideas about that, and we'll come back to that. So, all right, let's move on. Next slide, sorry. So here is what all of those sector by sector targets rolls into. And again, it's about reduction goals in 2030 and 2050, right? That's going to get us in line with where the state wants to go, okay? So there's the past, which is 1990. The state estimated that. I mean, that is a number that is plus or minus 20%. We don't know, because nobody in 1990 was counting every molecule and every gallon of gas and, all of that. So the baseline is just accepted, with whatever, tongue-in-cheek, 93.5 million, million metric tons of CO2, right, statewide. So that's why there isn't a county and city in that first column. Nobody tried to break it down, right? In 2021, again, as the legislation was doing its way, through the State House, they did go through and allocate from the state down to the county and the city level. So again, that's top down when they're down just carving up the pie. This is the first time we're coming bottoms up and saying, do we even all meet in the middle? We can end up with wildly different numbers, and that's up to Commerce to figure out, okay? So that's the interesting thing about all this. So 2021, again, in the county, and then also, though, in the city, you'll see the county is just county operations. It doesn't include your city. So that middle line, I put it there for completeness sake. But if you really do look at your city, right, it's, it was 133,187. It's different units. We just divided by a million because we're comparing that to 93.5. Very small percentage of the state. I mean, that is acknowledged, here in this city. But I think it's important, the bold numbers, to just see how those go down. Like when we take those percents by sector, how the sectors play into, you'll see that you're getting from 0.133, I'm just going to truncate it at 3 places past the decimal place, to 0.73, 0.073 to 0.04, basically. So there's really a cutting in half by 2030, or 30%, and then in half by 2040, and then the remainder to 2050. So that's how that plays out. Again, we hope that's Commerce, accepts that, because we think that's the best that can be done. So let's go to the next slide. So VMT, I think as Jessica said, because I know she's there, we spent wow, that is pink, yeah. Sorry, I did the slides, she imported them. I'm like, woo, we have a different color palette. All right, matches my jacket. All right, so VMT is a big driver, So when we talk about population, I want to just preface this. This is every man, woman, and child, regardless of age, in the state, in the county, in the city. Not every one of those persons drives, right? But you still do it on a per capita basis, I know when you first get your license, you drive everywhere. Then you get older, you're like, oh, I don't want to drive anymore. And then, I think we can probably relate to all of our parents or grandparents where last year my mom had her car, she drove 3,000 miles, right, a year. So when you start to see the annual VMT, you might scratch your head, and we'll talk about that. But statewide, they estimate, and it's just an estimate, that every man, woman, and child in the state of Washington is responsible for 7,610,000 miles. pause and think a minute, that actually kind of fits. If you think about the typical car, at least the insurance companies think, yeah, I'll drive about 12 to 15,000 miles per car. That car is carrying one adult and a couple of children to school, 2 adults to dinner, right? You start thinking how in a 2-car family, right? You know, you got 4 people, you're driving 28,000 miles, 4 times 7,610. It's not far off from your own experience. If that's what I'm saying, if you just kind of understand that. That doesn't mean your odometer only traveled 7,610. You've got more people in your family to account for. So that's why I just ask us to read it that way. So you'll see that for the county, it's much higher because that statewide number accounts for the highly urbanized area where many people in Seattle have 0 cars, right? They take the train, they might rent a car, that's included in there, but you know, they're having things delivered from Home Depot, not driving themselves there, that kind of thing. And so you can see how the county jumps up to 11,199 because you're talking about some rural areas where getting milk, getting anything is a trek, you know. Job centers are much removed from those rural residencies. And then you look at the city and you're at 9,251 per person. That, I mean, that fits. It absolutely makes sense. And again, we came by that, you know, in various organic ways. But it absolutely fits that you're somewhere between the statewide that includes, again, all those massive population job centers and the counties, which are much more rural. Fewer people, but longer trips for every trip they make. So you're right now sitting, as of 2022, at 9,251 annual VMT per person. Okay, we'll now see how that translates to our reduction targets. All right, next slide. So the goals, again, big picture, is that you were to decrease the annual per capita vehicle miles traveled by 18% by 2020. Again, it was off a 1991 baseline. This was kind of already in motion before this mandate came your way. That was met. That's rearview mirror. I was looking backwards, but just wanted to put it there. The other goal was to decrease the annual per capita vehicle miles traveled by 30%, statewide, again, we're talking statewide, by 2035. And so that means, on average, cutting 2,775,000 miles per capita in the next 10 years. Again, off of a somewhere between a 9, 11, again, you know, those aren't going to be shared evenly, but that's just to kind of give it some perspective. It's, you know, it's 35%. It's a third fewer miles. It's cutting out 1/4 of your trips, condensing them, making them not necessary. And that's what we're really going to be here to talk about. How do we do that? What's the vision for getting that to be a reality here? And then, by extension, it's decreasing the annual per capita vehicle miles by 50% by 2050. So there's also technology. You know, these are all assuming they're still gas miles, right? And that they are at the current fleet-wide average of 35 miles per gallon, because that's set by Washington, D.C. That's set at the federal level, and we know there's not going to be a big movement on that in the immediate future. So that standard of generally 35 miles to the gallon, and none of us get that in reality, but that's what they test on a track with ideal candidate conditions. But as older cars just naturally roll out of the fleet and new cars come in, they're all going towards that. But that does assume some shift, taking care of the rest of those miles to be less polluting, to other alternative fuels. And so don't have to do a lot on that. That's just, you know, the technology's there, it's gaining, but there are things the city might want to do to encourage or really to keep up with the demand for EVs, for example. So whether they're partial EVs, hybrids, you know, that sort of thing. So, all right, let's go. Next slide. So here's the general themes. Again, repeating back as Alex had done on the earlier resilience. It's really encouraging buildings to use either renewable energy, including solar, right, to conserve, i.e. use less, having lights in parking lots that only go on in zones, right? If you've got a large space, you don't need to light the whole thing all night long, but as a car drives by, they just automatically click on. That saves energy. We got to trade that with safety, of course, but that it actually is a very proven technology. And that's just it. There are other conservation efforts and efficient technologies and practices. Also prioritizing the adaptive reuse of buildings. And this seems counterintuitive to what I just said, which is new standards, new windows. But the idea that a building that's already here also just produces less emissions to do tenant improvements rather than tear it down to the ground and start all over, or worse, abandon it and turn more land that might have trees on it that are sequestering and turn that into another shopping center. So that's the idea of that theme of just prioritizing growth and adaptive reuse of buildings. As I said here, supporting measures to reduce VMT. And this really very much is about encouraging, and I know when we had the public meeting in April, the transit plan was, and that period is closed, right? Yeah, I think the comment period on that closed, but it was happening at the time that we did the public workshop on that. And just to, to be heard, and to have both citizens and and the leadership of the city, to hear them, to say, we want this, everything from better bus stops, to have bus stops that are better protected from the elements, because as the climate's changing, you've got warm spells, you've got deluges of rain, kind of removing those barriers. So there are local efforts that can encourage, and that's all you can do. You're encouraging, you're trying to get people to try transit, for example. And there's a lot of other, we'll come back to this. Expanding EV infrastructure, right? Understanding that how can you incentivize that in new building, whether that's duplexes or other, where it might just be more economic, or in commercial centers, giving priority parking to EVs, having chargers available. What can the city do to encourage that? That's what we're asking everyone to think about. And we don't have to have all the answers here tonight. Improving the efficiency of transportation systems, that's well within your own circulation. Incentivizing recycling materials, because of course wasting things, sending them to landfills, extracting more, that sort of thing, all results in GHG emissions. Maximizing solar access, and this again might be some cooperation with what is the barrier to solar, right? But also just reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector and increasing tree canopy. Cover multiple benefits to health, happiness about, tree cover, for example. So next slide, please. And here we are. I think this is where you come back in. All right, I will return to the podium when we have questions, but I think Alex is going to step in now.
So before we start going through the goals and policies, are there any questions that we can answer so far? And I want to be respectful of everyone's time too, because I did plan to maybe go through each goal and policy, but that's up to you. Are there any specific ones that you want to go over, or should we go over them all?
Questions? My first question is, how much is all this going to cost?
So it shouldn't cost you anything for the plan. So the plan is to encourage or incentivize or to look at your development regulations to figure out where you can put this in. So the comp plan is a guiding document. It's not a mandate to do anything, but it's a guiding document to make sure your regulations are consistent with what's in the plan.
But who has to measure the
Implementation plan?
isn't that
That's the
cost?
city. So the implementation plan is solely for greenhouse gas emissions. It's not for the climate resilience sub-element. But the implementation plan is required to be implemented by the city.
My thought would be, it would take a long time to actually read.
Do I get a little say here?
Oh, I'm sorry, whoops.
No.
1 second.
Oh.
Sorry, Joe.
Okay, sorry. It would take a long time to read through the whole thing, and my thought would be if you could touch on the topics.
The goals?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then if there are specific questions as you read through, we should allow questions as you're going through it,
Okay.
because it's quite extensive.
Understood.
Okay.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to be heard.
Of course.
Do I have the ability to speak right now?
I don't know if you can
Tom,
you hear me?
you're making that call.
Yeah, I think they just asked if there were any questions
Yeah,
so
Joe, you
far.
can speak.
Okay, so this is not a question. It's a statement. Okay? I hear everything that you're saying, but at the end of the day, that is not the city of Sedro-Woolley, right? You're bringing up a whole lot of different calculations on different things that I will tell you right now that we don't even have I mean, when I was looking at like natural gas, it's like, okay, well, yeah, well, we have single family residences and where are you going with these different calculations? But I will tell you right now that the city of Sedro-Woolley is now going to affect global warming in so many different ways. And I get where Jay Inslee was going with that. Okay. But at the end of the day, I represent my city, my community. Okay. And I'm disagreeing with a lot of your numbers right now, is the fact that you're throwing a whole bunch of stuff out there. That's fine. That's what you guys were hired for. But at the end of the day, no, we will not have this massive impact on global warming or anything else. So let's be specific now because I'm looking at a 10-year comprehensive plan, okay, that I want to be more effective where I'm looking at what we got going on, not what possibly could be. And I totally respect where you're coming from. But at the end of the day, no, those numbers don't work here. So let's start dealing with the numbers. Okay. We need to be in compliance with the state right now. And we get that. Yeah. And none of us right now are, this is just simply, it's a place that we just haven't been before. But, let's see if we can make it work.
Sure, and
Thank you.
that's why we want to be here today is to get your feedback to figure out how to make it fit in Sedro-Woolley's capacity to the extent possible. So totally
But it
respect
doesn't,
that. I
that's my
know.
point.
I understand. Next slide, please. Oops. Can we go back one? Thank you. So this first one is around buildings and energy. So I'm just going to read the goals, and then if you have questions on any of the policies, please feel free to speak up. So the goal here is to encourage buildings to be designed and built sustainably to reduce environmental impacts and to remain resilient to extreme weather or other hazards worsened by climate change. So we have a number of policies that are intended to support that goal. Are there any questions or concerns about those? So again, we tried to make them to coordinate or to reduce or to continue requiring to acknowledge that the city is already making measures to do that. So these are predominantly focused on low impact development, green stormwater infrastructure, reducing stormwater impacts from transportation and development, coordinate with Skagit PUD to develop and provide water efficiency strategies, and then work with organizations to incentivize green building certifications.
Madam, I believe we've done all of the above. Not only all of the above, we have a great development community, BYK, RJ Group. We are totally dialed in with our development community, and they've done a fantastic job. And that needs to be, acknowledged that everything you're going through right here, yeah, we've already not only been through it, it's like, yeah, they've done a fantastic job. So
Yeah,
let's keep going on. And
Okay.
listen, again, this is a team effort here,
sure.
right? But I want to tell you, there's a whole lot of people that committed millions and millions of dollars into this city, and they got it done. And I have a smile on my face, sitting back like, yeah, they did a great job. continue on. I apologize. And Tom, again, I just feel like I'm being a jerk right now. But anyway, I apologize.
That's okay. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, Danielle.
Oh, I just wanted to say, and this is kind of generally reading through this, I like, for the most part, I really liked what I saw. Like this first section here, it's not just vague, check the box, which obviously we do need to check boxes to get this to be okay with commerce. But all of these items, as you read them and as I read them, I was like, okay, I can actually see where we could have a path to do it. And as Commissioner Fatizzi said, a lot of this is already being done. In a way, how I'm seeing this is, well, a lot of communities, ours included, may not be all that pleased at being told to include a climate element in their comprehensive plans. The state of how the world is now is already moving that way, at least in the U.S., with, cleaner energy, greener, vehicles, better insulation in buildings. And so a lot of this, they're just saying you need to call it out because, as you know, a lot of times just because something's being done, if you're not focusing on it or if you're not calling it out, how can you improve, I think, is and of course I won't begin to try to interpret or say what everybody was thinking at the state level for having these guidelines in place, but I think that is a certain amount of it. It's just, it's something that people, communities need to be thinking about going forward and actually not just driven by economics or the green agenda or different stakeholders, I guess. So yeah, I really liked what I saw here because I didn't know what this was going to look like, and I think it's a great job. What I've seen so far, because for the most part, when I went through, I was like, okay, I can actually imagine there being a path forward for this, or we're already doing this.
Yeah, our team and the city staff worked really hard to make sure that it can be things that can be achieved by the city and the community, and we tried to make them be received that way and not frame it in a way that was alarming.
We're going to struggle, of course, with the vehicle miles traveled,
Yeah,
and if
that
we
one I
can,
don't know how to reframe.
if we can offset that, because we can't possibly be the only commuter community. There's got to be, like, if we can focus maybe on.
Yeah, we tried to focus on trails or things like that are already important to the community where efforts are already being taken. So we tried to highlight those in the goals and policies, and Heidi will go through that too, because we know that not everything is related to VMT. There's other ways to reduce it that maybe the city is already doing that we can highlight as efforts already being taken. Next slide, please.
I'm going to cut in again. Your efforts are absolutely appreciated.
Thank you, Joe.
And we're all, and because this city
I know.
is so important to us, we're all good on that. But we so appreciate all the effort that you guys put in here. And we're paying attention. Every word that you're saying right now, you bet we get it.
No, and we
Anyway,
totally understand your
yeah.
perspective too. It's not easy being told to do something, and unfortunately we have to relay that message, and we're hired to do that, but we want to make sure that it's something that you all can be happy with to the extent possible while being in compliance.
We're on the same team.
Okay, thanks.
We're all good.
Thanks, Joe. So the second goal is around agriculture and food systems. So it's work with agricultural organizations in the Port of Skagit to support the local agricultural community, including food material producers, distributors, and sellers, by planning for resilience to the impacts of extreme weather and other natural hazards worsened by climate change. So that's expanding food security and local food-related economy, and then also supporting the local agricultural community by providing venues to sell and distribute products. Any questions on that one before we move on?
I'm not a farmer, but I read in the paper and hear it on the radio that farmers are having more and more farming land taken from them with setbacks and things. If there's a mud puddle, you got to stay 200 feet from it. So what you're saying here is make it easier, or more important for farming, yet at the same time, they're taking farmland away. So how do you, are you going to stop taking farmland away or give it back, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, there's other goals and policies within the comprehensive plan that protect agricultural land. And if we want, our team can look at those and just provide a nexus here. I think that that would be a good overlap.
But that has nothing to do with us. Again, that's Skagit County. And I had that comment the last time. Skagit County, we are protected farmland and we love it. We're all good, okay? However, the city of Sedro-Woolley, we have different things going on. So if we could just stay focused on what we have in the city of Sedro-Woolley and not get complicated by what Skagit County and Scott and all those other folks need to do. I think that could be a little bit more effective right now.
Well, you're right, Joe, but what do we have here? A farmer's market, and that's about it.
Yeah, but guess what? The thing is, it's not our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
It's Skagit County.
So it could be a policy that's work with Skagit County to retain farmland.
Yeah.
I'd also like to
Yeah.
quickly pitch in. So it may be true now that we don't have very much significant agricultural use within the city, but we do allow it in our zones. So who's to say
Yeah.
that's not something that could happen in the future? We need to think of this as a comprehensive plan for the future.
Agreed.
If I might add on another point, I believe Food Pavilion sends money, or sends food over to, we have a huge Helping Hands, what is it called?
Food bank.
Food bank. And that, I think that that could also be a point, that the local grocery stores are providing surplus food to food bank to be distributed to families within our city.
That's a great point. We can add something to that effect. Next goal, please, or next slide, sorry. So this goal is around cultural resources, practices, and historic sites. So encourage cultural resources, practices, and significant historic sites to be resilient to the impacts of extreme weather and other natural hazards exacerbated by a changing climate. So that's protecting significant historic resources, sites, and structures, protecting, enhancing, and restoring ecosystems to meet tribal treaty rights, and establish and maintain government-to-government relations. Any questions?
Yeah, this is a fun one for me because I had this discussion with Julia Johnson, our mayor, just back at the beginning of the year. And this is what I said earlier. We got Mount Baker, right? We got literally volcanoes right in our backyard. We got the Skagit River that will do its own thing, right? So how do we sit back? And this was my question. It's like, I would love to be able to get like funding that we can protect people. And if this stuff basically hit the fan, it's like, how do we get people out of from point A to point B? And we were sitting back, right? So you have Highway 9, right? The only way I have to get people from the bottom of the city of Sedro-Woolley up to a place that they're literally out of harm's way. Yeah, so we start looking at these different policies and the different things we can do here. And I think it's really beyond important. And it's like, how could we possibly move when something hits the fan, okay, to get from point A to point B? Yeah, I'm interested myself. Yeah, I have no idea how we could even do it.
Yeah, we do have some goals on transportation, so I'll try to cover that. Next slide,
It's all
please.
about transportation, by the way. It's all about how could we get somebody from concrete, or it's that whole thing as to how we can mobilize people to get from point A to point B. And I don't want this to, again, I just feel like I'm dominating conversation here, and I'm not looking to do that. All I'm saying is, this has been part of a conversation that I've had with the mayor that to me is really, really important, is the fact that if something happens, okay, and it will, Mount Baker is a restless volcano, okay? Skagit River is a restless river, right? So how do we make all this stuff work? And how can we get certain types of funding at the point that we can move people from point A to point B?
Yeah, and hopefully some of these
Yeah.
goals and policies that identify vulnerabilities for you in transportation, you can use some
It's
of this.
vulnerabilities, you bet,
Yeah.
girlfriend. It's beyond vulnerabilities. Yes,
Yeah, we
very
tried to
much so.
address those in the memorandum, so I think you can use those for supporting grant applications. Next slide, please. So the next one is around emergency management. So develop and maintain local government staff members' technical expertise and skills related to climate change and environmental justice as to improve countywide planning, policy implementation, equity, and resilience. So that's factoring climate impacts into planning and operations, working with Skagit County and other jurisdictions and agencies, and then also strengthening relationships with Skagit County and municipal partners in coordination with Skagit PUD. Any questions?
I think it's great.
Okay.
Personally, I live in the UGA, so I live just outside city limits, and the water comes to my property line and no further, and I was told it'd be $70,000 to take a pipe across the front of my property, so I would be on city water, so we continue to be on well water, so.
And we've added these with Skagit PUD, so
Yeah, so I personally like that one, thank you.
you're welcome.
I don't want to pay $70,000.
Totally reasonable. Next slide, please. So these are additional emergency management goals. So develop and implement a strategy to expedite management of debris, ensure that the city's comprehensive emergency management plan and emergency response plan responds to climate impacts, establishing regulations for best practices for reducing wildfire, extreme heat, flooding, and other hazards, develop and implement a wildfire smoke resilience strategy, and then develop and implement notification alerts within the community to reduce exposure of wildfire smoke and particulate matter when there's a wildfire.
I really liked all of these. Yeah, because actually to Commissioner Fatizzi's point, I also was thinking about an eruption of Mount Baker and kind of what happened with Mount St. Helens and the mud flows down the river, and, you know, we're downriver, so, you know, we wouldn't be as impacted as other communities, but it's still, so this, having something in place, I mean, there's already, you know, a plan in Skagit County, but just calling it out and just, it can work for more than one thing. It can be climate related, it can also be an immediate natural disaster related that isn't climate related.
Yeah, that's why
And so, yeah, totally what Commissioner Fatizzi was talking about a couple slides ago, this is it, and I think it's great.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Commissioner Freiberger, all I want is how we fund it. And it's your dad that I had that conversation with before he retired. It's like, how do I get people from point A to point B? Okay, and how can I get that funded? And right now, that's what it really comes down to. It isn't the fact that we know that danger exists. Of course it does. That would be idiocy, thinking that we don't know that there's a volcano in your backyard. And it is. We got a volcano in our backyard. So at the point, at the end of the day, is like, when the stuff happens, and it will, it's like, how do we get people from point A to point B? And yes, I had that discussion with your dad.
And
we were looking at different funding of different ways to get potentially different funding, just even for like signage, okay? Go this way.
And I think these goals and policies are the start of that, because
You can
grant
get
funding,
emergency
you have to identify this stuff in your comprehensive plan in order to have that leverage And it's basically like showing your work when you apply for anything. They want you to show why
This
this,
grant was-
identify, basically give us your documentation and tell us why you need this. Why should we give you money? And if it's in our comprehensive plan, then that's a start.
Yeah, it's definitely
Yep.
helpful. Next slide, please. So this goal is around health and well-being, protect community health and well-being from the impacts of climate-exacerbated hazards, prioritizing focus on overburdened communities in Sedro-Woolley, and ensure the most vulnerable residents do not bear disproportionate health impacts. So there's a number of policies designed to support that.
I did have a question. That table earlier in the presentation that identified the levels of risk, is that going to be, was that just part of how these were kind of classified, or is that actually going to be in the appendix?
It's gonna be an
Oh,
appendix.
okay, because I hadn't seen all of that, and I thought, oh, wow, this is really helpful.
Sorry.
Yeah, no,
Sure, it comes with the next iteration,
Yeah.
so that you can go through all of that.
because it's, of course, part of showing our work to Commerce, but
It's a
yeah.
bulky document, but we'll give you the highlights.
it's great.
So any questions on this one before we move on? Because I know we have 15 goals and then Heidi has 9, so. Next slide, please. So this one is around urban tree canopy covers. So review the city's codes and plans to identify opportunities to incentivize urban tree canopy retention and enhancement to increase resilience. And Heidi talked about the multiple co-benefits of that as it relates to GHG emissions reduction as well.
Can you help me understand the size that would be required for private forest land? Is that like half an acre? Is that not brush hogged at all? Is that
So-
uncleared?
That's a good point. So typically private forest land is, I think, anything over 2 acres according to DNR, but I could get back to you on that and we could do a better job at defining that.
No problem. We're getting ready to clear 2 acres on our property, actually, and looking at the wildfire risk of all the brush that has
Yeah.
been built up over the years and why it's so important, just in case we have a wildfire that goes through our property, to try to not give it as much
So
kindling as
Commissioner,
possible.
I can opine a little bit on that. Yeah, you're in unincorporated Skagit County, okay, and they have totally different policy when it comes to what those requirements are. The city of Sedro-Woolley, we're gonna have way different requirements that, it's a different part of the code, so to speak. But that's a great question. And all I'm gonna say is, yeah, Skagit County would be the jurisdiction at that point. And yes, we do take wildfire issues very seriously. It's all good. By the way, you have an amazing property. I've seen it. Yeah, it's all good.
I think the point here is that the city would work with, would encourage its residents and folks who are interested to work with DNR on techniques that they could manage their land that would achieve that policy.
Yeah, and we can make a reference to Washington State DNR to clear that up.
And
That'd be
Thomas,
great.
you
Thank
know this, DNR, they run the deal. Okay, so it doesn't matter what we think in the city of Sedro-Woolley or anyplace else. I'm telling you right now, DNR, yeah, they will be the number one, this is the way it's got to go kind of thing. So whatever we do here in our city of Sedro-Woolley, now DNR, they're God. Just saying. Yeah, have at it. Not my fight.
So we'll take a look at that one to see if we can coordinate with DNR instead. Next slide, please.
May I ask another question on
Oh,
that
of
one?
course, sorry.
Over here. On 6.4, you address streams, increasing climate resiliency of streams, and I was just curious what that might involve, as like Joe was talking about earlier, when things are deemed wetlands. There's a lot of restrictions on any clearing or anything you do around those.
Right, so I think the intent was to encourage tree retention around areas of streams because they provide multiple co-benefits in terms of like water quality and stream temperature and things that relate to ecosystem functions. So we could change that to stream buffers or stream,
No problem with your wording. I just was,
okay.
I wanted to be more educated on that.
Oh,
So
okay.
thank you.
No problem.
So I can add into that as well. Okay?
Sure.
County will designate where the critical area, what we consider a critical area, right? As to where that boundary is and where the classification comes back. So to answer your question, okay, has nothing to do with what we're asking somebody to do. Okay, DNR is going to say, okay, especially if we're now unincorporated Skagit County versus the city of Sedro-Woolley versus whatever. They set their setbacks as to what that critical area classification is. And we've gotten into this when we did our PRD code, okay, where we base it on the amount of buildable land versus what, you know, if I got 20 acres, okay, but only 5 of it's actually buildable, right? So you get into all these different things, but a lot of that stuff is to what that question is right now. It has nothing to do with the city of Sedro-Woolley or, believe it or not, Skagit County. It'll go down to what the state mandates as far as the setbacks go.
Well, I think this is
This is the way
intended to
it
be like
is.
enhancing, like stream buffers or enhancing
Yeah,
tree canopy.
exactly. Yeah,
This is beyond regulatory. It's just encouraging private landowners to
Correct.
increase their resilience.
yeah.
Let's
And
move
we
on
don't-
if we
we
can,
don't-
please.
Okay, so it's just the way it is.
Next slide, please. Oh, thanks, Woody. You're on top of it. So this is about ecosystems, so ensure the protection and restoration of streams, riparian zones, estuaries, wetlands, and floodplains to achieve healthy watersheds that are resilient to climate change. So that is predominantly protecting and restoring and enhancing, as we talked about earlier. Any questions on this one before we move on? Okay. Next slide, please. So this is also in relation to that same goal. So implement actions identified in restoration and salmon recovery plans and protect and restore wetlands and corridors. Next slide. So this goal is around water resources. So coordinate with Skagit Public Utility District to protect and preserve water quality and quantity from drought, extreme heat, and other hazards exacerbated by climate change. So most of these are to work with Skagit PUD to identify or to implement strategies that are already identified either in their strategic plan or their water system plan. Next slide. So again, these are around the same goal. So identify and implement or develop and implement a drought resilience strategy, manage water resources, incentivize green infrastructure and low impact development, and then prioritize strategies that are already identified in the City of Sedro-Woolley's Stormwater Action Plan. Next slide. So this one is around zoning and development, establish land use patterns that increase the climate resilience of the built environment, ecosystems, and communities. So review the land use maps, consider climate change impacts in floodplain management planning, and then encourage the siting and planning for relocation of hazardous industries away and essential public facilities like those that are already identified in the Skagit County multi-jurisdictional HMP away from the 500-year floodplain. Oh, go ahead.
Could we possibly put that reference in there, the HMP thing? Just because, I mean, thinking about it, I was thinking, okay, I think I know what essential public facilities are, but
Yeah, I could put particularly those identified in the, okay,
That would be great. Thank you.
can do. Next slide, please. So this one is around transportation. So assess the local transportation system, including infrastructure, routes, and travel modes to evaluate whether the system is able to withstand the impacts of extreme weather events and other hazards exacerbated by climate change. So that's mapping vulnerable infrastructure, planning for relocation of infrastructure that might be at risk of flooding, landslides, or other hazards, identify susceptible locations, and coordinate with relevant agencies, and encouraging a robust circulation in the multimodal transportation network.
Can you elaborate more on that? Because I know this town. So
That could be like,
how possibly, as I'm reading that, no, and it has to be part of the document, but how do we even get to something like this? I'm just saying.
sure.
Go ahead. I'm listening. I'm all ears.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and talk about that. I mean, there's a myriad of ways, and really the idea, as you know, is not that this policy would be overly prescriptive, but you asked. Again, this is where we asked people in the surveys, what is your barrier to rolling, riding, taking a bus, et cetera? And everything from incomplete sidewalks to ADA compliance, or poor lighting, or, having a designated safe street to school with, a safer bike route, right? Moms and dads might be more willing to, let little Johnny, little Susie, ride to school and not drive them in their personal vehicle if they felt that that was a protected, well-marked bike lane, for example. So those are the sorts of things that we're talking about that will help get people out of cars and avail themselves of your local circulation network if it's set up. I mean, for example, I've driven your city and you've got your roundabouts, which serve a purpose, but think about how intimidating that is to someone riding a bicycle. Do they get off and push? Do they just walk it through because it's not your standard 4 square? So it could even just be education, actually, Commissioner. It really could be anything that falls into that bucket about just a series of PSAs on how to navigate that as a cyclist to sort of demystify and take some of the fear out. Anyway, that's what we were thinking along those lines.
I'm a biker kind of guy. And I think, if anything, that Sedro-Woolley's done a really great job at is the fact that, you can absolutely get to every single, crossing, and you'll have the ability to do it. And it's definitely compliant with ADA and everything else. And I've never seen a city like this that actually went to that kind of level. So it's actually kind of really a cool kind of thing. So I'm not going to sit back and dissuade of where this whole conversation's going. Yeah, Sedro-Woolley rocks when it comes to stuff like that. And I apologize again for interrupting with how you want to get your whole thing going on here. But it's all good. No, we rock when it comes to that. You bet we do.
Yeah, I think we just put that in there because it was noted as a barrier in the community survey. Next slide, please.
Oh,
Oh, I'm
Just
sorry.
one quick comment on 10.5 there. When I read it, it seemed a little bit awkward to me, and so while I get the gist of what it's going for, encourage robust circulation in the multimodal transportation network to allow for alternative modes of transportation. Well, we're already encouraging that, so I know we wouldn't want to say encourage again, but allow just seems,
Barriers? I don't.
yeah, maybe that's kind of what I was thinking for.
I did see in other policies, it's to continue to, and so I think that both celebrates as far as
Yeah.
you've come, but realize there may be
Yeah.
other things, painting arrows that are, low cost, not no cost, but low cost, that would be the next step. So I think maybe, because I saw that in some of our other policies, continue to encourage and expand or something like that.
Yes, expand. Yeah, that would be great. Allow just was weird because we're already talking about.
Yeah, no, that definitely
Yeah,
makes sense.
so-
We can address that. Great points.
Could you name some alternate modes of transportation?
Sure. like walking, rolling, biking, scootering, skating.
Okay, so are golf carts legal in this city? Horses,
I don't know
quads?
about that.
No,
Yeah, that's
Are
the
those
local
alternate?
jurisdiction.
Yeah, you could
no,
have,
but those would
Yeah,
be,
horses
those would
would
be
be.
alternate.
if you want to
forms of
reduce mileage, is that across the board? Or,
No, if golf carts are street legal, so.
well, I mean,
You can
you're,
go in
you're
your
asking for
Yeah.
alternative modes. There's some
Totally up
cities,
to you, I think.
some cities are all golf carts. I thought for sure,
Golf carts sounds good to me.
anyway.
It also includes transit and access
Do
to
not
transit
touch
stops.
babies.
Okay.
I know we want to
He's
be fast,
right.
but I got to tell you, Arizona is a state that allows off-road vehicles on road. The off-road vehicle
And they do.
manufacturers hate it. Just going to say it, I'm not taking a stance on this, because they don't build vehicles to withstand impact. But Arizona, it is legal, right? But they're dirty. I'm just going to say that now. You know, that's not the alternate mode we're probably wanting to encourage. Electrically charged golf carts, maybe, right? So I just wanted to say that not every cart being smaller is going to be cleaner.
Okay, electric bikes are becoming a big thing, and people go up and down our road at 40, 50 miles an hour with no helmet on, and you can't tell me they can withstand an accident.
As a cyclist who I have both a street bike and an e-bike, because I trek. I've gone overnight on my e-bike. I had to buy a helmet from Holland because there is no standard in America. So about withstanding anything over 15 miles per hour. That's all that little bike helmet is. So I have an e-bike helmet that I had to buy from Holland because they bike like crazy over there. So I'm with you. I hear you. But there are products out there, but not most people know about it. Absolutely.
All right, we'll move to the next slide. So this one is around infrastructure, so encourage land conservation or acquisition to protect infrastructure functions at risk of climate-related hazards. Acquire properties or easements on properties that are vulnerable to climate exacerbated hazards, and then plan for relocation of infrastructure that might be at risk of flooding, landslides, or other natural hazards. Danielle, or Commissioner.
So 10.2 and 11.2 are identical. So I was thinking if we kind of want to address it in both spots, maybe have it a little bit different, or maybe it's fine to have it identical. But when I read that, I was like, wait a minute, I just read that on the previous page. So that.
Oh, yeah, that's weird. Okay, that's a great point. I was like, I thought I read that.
Not that it doesn't fit in both spots, but I don't know that we really need it in both spots.
Yeah, we
but
probably don't. We can just remove 11.2 because I feel like it might be better suited for transportation. Great point. Next slide.
Oh,
Oh, I'm
Danielle,
sorry.
just sitting back as to, yeah, I totally get the terminology on it, but I also look around the city and how we have certain places that would be at risk with a whole bunch of different kind of things that just even looking at the valuation of these folks, and the families own their, they own these properties. So I want to make sure that anything that we do here, okay, is compliant with the fact that we respect private property rights. Okay, and that's really, really important. Just saying that when we do different things, especially if we're doing zoning things, whatever, which we don't have that going on right now. All I'm saying is this is all really great conversations going on right now. But sometimes we're on a kind of like a slippery kind of slope. And I don't want to get on that slippery slope. I just want to respect people's property values, number one. Number two, to be compliant with what the requirements are from the Growth Management Act, that we get what we need to get done in a very responsible way. And I think that right now, this is all good stuff, okay? Great consulting firm, thumbs up. But remember, we actually know what we're looking at too.
Sure.
So,
No, that's why we want your feedback. And we can loosen up the language on 11.1 and say consider acquiring or plan for acquisition.
This sounds like it's directing.
Yeah.
And we would not want anyone to come say, come buy this right now, pay
Yeah.
me, because you said you would. So I do think, now that we're looking at that with a critical eye, that
We
we
could,
can step that back a little.
yeah, to be more respectful of private property.
On 11.2, I'm wondering if that is the right thing to say right there, because under transportation, that's 10.2 is the right thing to say for planning for transportation infrastructure.
Oh, and this is.
11.2 applies to any and all infrastructure, is how I would interpret that, to include a wastewater treatment plant, for example, that is awfully close to the river and does have that potential. I wonder if it is,
Public infrastructure or critical infrastructure to maybe make that more clear.
yeah.
That's great. Yeah, no, I did think it fit in both spots. I was just thinking maybe,
Might be a little duplicative. So we
yeah,
could
and so a
maybe-
way to kind of specify, I was thinking, well, it is referring specifically under that goal, but
That's great. I think that strengthens the policy and makes it more clear. So we will revise 11.1 and 11.2.
So one more question on 11.1. So I'm trying to understand, is this the idea of buying property that is at risk to protect other, like, infrastructure or whatever that's in between, like you don't want it developed? Or what is, I'm kind of unclear on what the purposes of.
So the intent is, so maybe you have a property that's going to be completely flooded, or you have properties that are already identified for acquisition in your hazard mitigation plan to relocate facilities or something like that. That's why we said or easements, because sometimes too, like if you have a roadway that's at risk and you need to relocate it, you're going to need to acquire land or an easement in order to relocate it. So it was intended to be broad to reflect multiple situations, but if there's additional specificity that the planning commission would like, we're totally open to that.
Well, how I,
Danielle, expand a little bit more on that, because I'm trying to think of exactly, and I'm thinking like your father. Right now, it's kind of like, okay, I got waste management kind of things I need to do. And where Bill gave that discussion last week, okay, how do we make the infrastructure, let's just say, combine with what it's not just the goal, it's more the fact that these are mandatory kind of things that we have to accommodate, right? So what are your thoughts on how you would want to phrase something like that? And my own opinion is it's like it's a non-negotiable kind of thing at that point. So thoughts?
well, my question is how I read it, and I wasn't sure I was understanding it, was that the city would be acquiring vulnerable land to what, take it out of the market, or to keep it from being built on and causing problems, or would it be to be a buffer to protect? That's what I was just not quite clear on, what the
All the
goal
above. Yeah.
was there, I guess.
And I sit back on that, and exactly as the city expands, right? We got to sit back, and we have to sit back and say, hey, well, gee, how are we going to handle certain capacities, especially on the waste side? Okay, and this is what I mentioned earlier, and this is not being disrespectful to anybody. We don't have a solid waste facility, but we got great solid waste facilities just going on into I can take junk and bring it straight into the city. No big deal. It's going to cost me whatever, or it's going to be free. So we have solid waste facilities. Okay. However, our waste facilities, as far as poo, yeah, I'm not too sure where we're at with that. And I know we need to expand our waste treatment plant in the next 5 years. So that's a whole different conversation, that the only way we're going to be able to keep up with a whole lot of stuff is the fact that we're going to be able to expand not only our waste treatment plant, but yeah, we got a whole bunch of other real estate that's like right next to it. Okay, that's the only way we're going to be able to do it. So
I think to your point, Commissioner, we could reframe this to make it seem less like the city's going to acquire it because it's at risk, and more like for a resilience purpose, like to restore the floodplain or to relocate infrastructure. I think we could make that more clear.
Okay, because I almost
Totally
thought,
get what you're saying.
I almost thought when you were saying, oh, we're talking about relocating, but in that case, you wouldn't be buying vulnerable property, you'd be acquiring non-vulnerable property to
Well, some of them
relocate
you would
stuff.
be acquiring vulnerable property because I think, so like the property that's identified in the hazard mitigation plan is one that's already gonna be flooded, but it's for floodplain restoration.
Oh, I see.
Or for
Yeah.
a broader purpose that
Okay.
is at risk, but
Okay.
is like dual purpose.
Okay.
So I think we could make that more clear.
Perfect, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, next slide. So this one is around waste management. So protect and adapt critical infrastructure, including water and sewer facilities, to ensure resiliency to a changing climate. So these are around the wastewater treatment facility and future projections, assess vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure within the floodplain. We've talked about that for a few at-risk facilities, and then invest in technologies to improve the efficiency of critical infrastructure. And that's, again, dual purpose for greenhouse gas emissions reductions.
Should we call this wastewater management and not waste management?
Yeah, I think we did it to match the sectors that are identified within Commerce's guidance, just to show that we addressed each one, but I totally see that that might make it more sense. We can definitely
so
do that.
Tom, to add into that, it's the state that's going to have the different requirements because we got the Skagit River, which is sacred. Okay, so it's not going to be up to the city of Sedro-Woolley as to how these different situations, come about. Burlington's doing the same thing. Sedro-Woolley's doing the same thing. Now we're going to have the most state-of-the-art waste treatment plants on the planet Earth. Okay, but it's all going to be predicated as to what the state of Washington says, because we're going to be dispersing water, okay, into the Skagit River. And the Skagit River is sacred, and it should be.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next slide. So this one is also around waste management, but this one, I think we could clarify the two. So this one would be encourage the community to reduce, reuse, and recycle waste materials sustainably. So identify opportunities in the city to reduce carbon emissions, and then encourage recycling of paper, food, textile, and metal waste.
Are you seeing textile recycling available in other communities? It's been in the news a lot with other countries putting restrictions on textile disposal.
This was a recommendation of Commerce, but that's a really good point.
At an industrial scale, the one I'm most familiar with is using blue jeans to be insulation, wall insulation. Especially in older buildings that were built with none, and you're going to blow, obviously in new construction, you're going to roll out that lovely yellow, stuff, but they actually do kind of shred it, and it actually has a great ability. So that is a technology I'm personally aware of when I think of textile recycling. In that sense, but you're right, it's not as popular here as it is in other countries. But that's also, moving textiles from here to another country is a lot of greenhouse gases. So there's some pros and cons to that. Anyway.
Thank you.
Any questions on this one? Next slide, please. So this one is around buildings and energy. So evaluate whether energy infrastructure, including generation and transmission, is able to accommodate renewable energy opportunities and to withstand the impacts of extreme weather and natural hazards worsened by climate change. So this came up in the community meeting. So we put a policy in there to work with energy utilities to improve safety and reliability of infrastructure that's vulnerable to climate change. That includes severe weather. And then to continue to require new subdivisions to bury electricity lines,
I
just
believe,
to acknowledge what or the city's already doing.
I believe the points, are they supposed to be CR? These are the only two that are CF.
Oh, weird. Whoops. Thank you for catching that.
Of course.
I also have a comment, Alex.
Yes.
This one has the same name as CR1, so just also needs to be.
Yeah, I think we were doing them to acknowledge the sector, but we can just change this to energy or electricity. Either one. Next slide, please. I think this is the last. Yeah, the last in climate. So this one is around economic development to support the creation of employment opportunities within Sedro-Woolley, particularly for residents that commute outside of city limits to reduce VMT. This came up in the community meeting, so we wanted to create a goal to address that. So in order to help achieve that goal, we had policies to support the implementation of the goals and policies within the economic development element, ensure that the local economy is resilient to climate-related hazards and fosters business opportunities, consider undertaking a comprehensive study assessing the feasibility of encouraging and expanding living wage employment opportunities, and then encourage improving access to reliable high-speed internet to facilitate working from home and increase educational opportunities or workforce training. Yes.
So 15.2, and maybe this is getting too specific, and it kind of, I guess, is expanded on maybe right there in 15.3 afterwards. But when I read it, I was like, how? This is really vague to me. What are we talking about with, how do you ensure the local economy is resilient to climate-related hazards? And the only thing I could think of really is a diverse economy, which of course is hard to, I suppose there's maybe grant funding and stuff you can have for different types of businesses and stuff. I don't know if it would be practical to put diversifying in there somehow, or
We could take a try at that.
because
And instead of ensure, we could also change it to encourage, and then we could identify how the city can foster business opportunities.
Because it's similar to when you invest, right? You invest in a broad range so that if one goes down, you're not going to lose your whole investment. And I assume, like say there's a drought one year and your entire economy is ag, or Skagit Steel closes down and your entire economy is, everybody's working for them, then you take a huge hit. And Sedro-Woolley's kind of seen that a bit in the past with kind of limited and very employers who employ like a large percentage, like that's people who aren't commuting are literally working for the same 3 companies here. And I think we've always struggled to, how do you diversify so that when your timber industry goes under or your mining, this has happened in towns and cities all across the nation, of course.
That's a really great point. We can revise that to reflect a more diverse opportunity.
And then
And
15
get rid
point,
of ensure.
and then 15.3 just kind of goes into that a little bit more there too, so.
I was sort of picturing on that one also logistical supply lines, being able to get fuel in so that local businesses are able to continue operations, getting food in, getting water and things like that. If the water treatment facility is not working, if PUD loses supply lines, whatever, are there modes in place for the city to continue operations?
That's a great point.
So can I add a little bit here? We can't predict the future. It's like totally impossible. All I can say is one thing. Yeah, the city of Sedro-Woolley is seeing like so many different iterations in its life. Yeah, from timber industry to where we're at right now, that I got to tell you, I got a whole lot of positive things that are happening in this city. So again, this is a comprehensive plan, right? That just simply means that we're giving it our best shot as to what we think and the policies and the goals we put in place. Again, policies and goals. Okay, they're not like mandatory things, just simply for the fact that we thought about it, we put policies in place to accomplish it, we put infrastructure, very importantly, in place to accomplish all this kind of stuff. So let's stay focused on the fact that this is a comprehensive plan. And it doesn't mean that that's going to be, at the end of the day, something that's going to play itself out. Yeah, we hope it does. But you know what? There might be some little iterations on different things that go on at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will pass it over to Heidi to talk about the
All right, next slide, please. So again, we have, I think, 5 coming up here for GHG emissions reductions. Oh, 9, okay. Whew, we'll get through this. All right, let's go. Next slide, please. So this is very much about the feedback that we got from the community meeting. And again, the last 2 bullets you just saw on the last slide, we feel really great that that came out of a very lively discussion on workforce training, on really allowing people to stay here in the community who live here and also work here. So I thought that was exactly what a robust engagement strategy is supposed to do. But here are other things that we heard. Some of it will be a repeat, but it's important to have multiple routes to access county connectors within the transit system. It really is a alternate means of travel, away from just the single occupancy automobiles. There is a concern about electric vehicle and really the loss of gas tax revenue on the state level, a little out of scope, but it was definitely noted. Job creation and retention we talked about, and in doing that in many different avenues. We heard about improving the city's pedestrian and bicycle network, and definitely acknowledge that it's been a priority for the city, as I think we've heard the commissioners here say, but heard loud and clear that it is difficult for many community members to even consider EVs when electricity service is not currently reliable. And so this is where the city has, a potential role to play in encouraging and coordinating and maybe just amplifying. It is very different when an individual is saying this versus, a city government. And so that was, where we sort of came out with that. Talked about the transit service in the city, but particularly surrounding in the rural areas, but also about prioritizing transit shelters, as again, we heard that from the survey being a barrier to use of transit. Next slide, please. And so this was something I alluded to earlier, and I just felt we needed to remind ourselves that straight out of their requirements that meeting your obligation to reduce GHG emissions will require implementation of tangible actions, that a set of policies limited to study or consideration will not reduce GHG emissions. So just, again, we've said here, we're all in this together, and these are not easy, things you're being asked to do, but that is directly a quote out of guidance from Commerce. So we just wanted to keep that in everybody's forefront. Next slide, please. So on goal GHG 1, it's about encouraging buildings that use renewable energy, other conservation measures, and efficient technologies and practices. This is about encouraging net zero greenhouse gas emission features, anything from Energy Star to no natural gas, et cetera. Just those are the ideas there. But the idea of maximizing the use of renewable energy sources, this could be something the city has to take up, because when you really get to scale on solar beyond just the rooftop, you usually need a battery backup. And I know fire departments are a little reluctant, so there's information and education that possibly the city would want to go through. I mean, that's just an example. But the idea of also really encouraging some energy efficiency in retrofitted, remodeled, and new private-owned facilities. The new is a little easier. It's a little harder when you've got a very mature housing stock. how to do that. And encourage can mean many, many things. It can mean everything from just educating homeowners about rebates when they come up, and grants and things like that. So we left it fairly, open there. But anyway, we can talk about. I know there's another one coming up. Any questions on this one? Yes, Commissioner Farnum.
So, well, kind of just a jumping off point a little bit here. Nicole, do we do solar permits here in Sedro-Woolley?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And do we have do we have any incentives or anything for solar?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Okay. I know there's something, I want to say, a few years ago I had heard about in the county that was promoting that, but I don't know anything about it. So might be something to look into, obviously, for this, just having a goal and a policy, for the other thing I guess I was thinking about is that with the 2021 building codes that were adopted, the energy codes were a huge topic of contention, and it took forever to get that passed. And a lot of people were unhappy with it, but that also is kind of helping jurisdictions or moving things along in a way to strongly encourage, if not require, to be, get those credits and, have that as efficient as possible, your buildings.
Exactly. I mean, I've worked with a number of communities, and when we say encourage, everything from having a energy roundup day where you just bring the various departments and staff and everyone can kind of come and find out and kick the tires. You ask vendors to come and look how quiet these great windows are. It costs little, it doesn't cost nothing. It can be everything from just maintaining lists of suppliers that have Energy Star heaters available, right? Encouraging your local vendors to maintain that list. So when making a selection, being a repository for information can definitely fit under encourage, that's you're right. It's not, doesn't mean you have to blaze a new trail, because that is contentious. But the idea is to, to be that beacon of information, because people don't know where to go and what to believe.
And that's a good point, because it used to be we would, I worked for Mount Vernon, and we would send people to the WSU's, energy code and page, and usually they could figure it out. They'd kind of tinker around and figure it out. Now, with the changes, it's just even more like the more help we can have, like our building official and plan reviewer, will meet with people at the counter, kind of walk them through the energy code worksheet, tell them this is how you can get your credits and everything, because it is confusing, especially for the, the single family homeowner who doesn't do this for a living. So that is something I'm sure that our staff is already doing, but yeah.
All right. Next slide, please. GG2 is to prioritize the adaptive reuse of buildings, recognizing the emissions reduction benefits of retaining existing buildings. Again, we're in line with what Commerce is expecting. And so this is, maybe more relevant, as again, housing and building stock, ages, but to encourage the preservation and reuse of existing buildings, possibly with incentives, as simple as expedited permit review, but also prioritizing preservation and weatherization of housing in overburdened communities. Everything from trying to encourage a community day where should a homeowner, desire but needs help with weatherization for, the elderly and those who are less mobile, that might be a way for the community to rally around and to show how easy it is to do, and contribute. Many ways that this can, play out. So not a big ask. There are others that are, but not a big ask.
So I'm just gonna throw this in here.
Yes, please.
It's impossible to do. Okay, and here's why. It's simply different people are going to own different properties, right? If you got somebody that's like flipping something, or again, I'm a real estate broker. All I'm saying is we can put this in there as a policy and a goal, but at the end of the day, now it's simply not going to happen for, and here is why. Okay, I would love to see a situation where we have elderly people or whatever that you come on in, and all of a sudden you can get $100,000 right off the bat, okay, to increase the value of that house. But what we think of as, you know, positive kind of things to do, in reality, it just doesn't play itself out. So yeah, I think it's great putting it in there, but at the end of the day, no, it's never going to happen. So anyway, yeah, sadly.
Not disagreeing with you, Commissioner. I will say also, as the utility companies have the pressure on them to clean up their electricity, their grid,
Correct.
what
Yeah.
they're bringing, they will start digging into their pockets and coming to incentives. I've seen this in other states and other communities. And so that's an opportunity where you wait until they've got some money, whether you match it or you just, again, offer workshops. I'm hearing all these great words. And that is what encourage, can mean. So
That's great. And you wanna
there's
know
things
what?
that are gonna
The
happen in
second
the next
you
10
break loose
years.
that checkbook, okay, and you make that happen, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah,
all
exactly.
in.
All right, next slide, please. Reduce vehicle miles traveled. Yes, you can see the size of this page. This is what we've been talking about, talking around. Partner, create, right? Identify, evaluate, work with, support. We really chose these verbs carefully. They are actionable. It isn't just wait on the side that someone else is going to solve it, but it's very much about, where can you encourage? Where can you help guide when there's another agency that wants to encourage, right? And so this is where, identifying the existing barriers, for example, and really listening to the people who are using those trails, but listening to the people who aren't using them, and really understanding what a city can do, what's in your purview, so that you don't miss the low-cost option, right? That sort of thing. And so, I'm not going to read them to you. They're up there. If you have any questions on any one of them, I'm here. Any choice of words, this is our time to, to take a look at them. So give everybody a moment.
Of course, we still have no idea if this language is going to pass muster with commerce. Our supporting the appendix plays into this or connects with this to where they can see we've got kind of our data to back it up.
I'm right now at the point trying to quantify the efficacy of all these. It's a little bit of a challenge, I'm going to admit. And that's really what they're going to see, is when I start saying, this will get you 5% and this will get you 10%.
Okay.
That's where the proof is in the pudding. And we're not there yet. That takes some real time. So yeah, I think we're all collectively understanding that this is all a great a la carte menu, but at the end, what is it all going to mean if any or all of it is implemented? And so that is going to be a delicate dance, and we are literally in the middle of that. So.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify too, that what Heidi's talking about is in support of these
You wanted
rules
to-
and policies. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. So I just want to clarify what Heidi's talking about. So the goals and policies that are included in the GHG emissions reduction sub-element are going to be addressed in an implementation plan that we are going to take back to you. We just wanted to separate them because we didn't want to inundate you with many things this evening, but so we'll come back to you with the revisions that are discussed this evening and then an implementation plan on how to address some of these.
Yep. All right, next slide. All right. Expand electric vehicle infrastructure. And this is, again, is incentivizing electric vehicle charging infrastructure in all new and buildings undergoing, major retrofits, and incentivizing new development to install EV charging infrastructure during construction. This last one, just to be specific, is about what they call laying the cable, right? Just planning for every garage to have its own charger. You don't want to put it in now because charger technology is going to get better. That's not what we're saying, but when you're building a new house, to say, make sure you've got the circuitry, whatever that's, run the raceway now in every garage and just stub it out, right? Like that is the idea on that one.
A friend of mine built a house recently in LaConner, and he was forced to put in the electric system for electric car. He doesn't have an EV. So he reluctantly did it. It was an extra 10 grand. Then the fire chief came over and said, now that you have the EV charging station, you have to put in a sprinkler system. And he says, I didn't want that, and I just certainly don't want that. So that was another 20 grand for a guy trying to build a house. And it's upsetting when you hear stuff like that.
Absolutely. And so, that is the sort of thing where it's going to take a comprehensive look at that, because other communities have crossed this already that don't encourage sprinklers because you've got, an EV charger. I mean, a commercial sized battery storage unit that caught on fire, everybody's seen that video. Everybody's sure that's what's going to happen. Very different than, a much lower voltage EV charger. And so it is a lot about educating the fire services on safety issues. I mean, they have a role to play in this, absolutely, but kind of coming together with a no-nonsense policy. So I have heard of things happening. That does not surprise me, sir. And it's unfortunate because the two don't need to, be at odds like that, because anyone would admit that's a burden, So, all right. Next slide, please. Improve the efficiency of transportation systems. So this is just a big coordinate with Skagit Transit to improve transit speed, connectivity, frequency, coverage, reliability, expanding transit stops, particularly near commercial and employment areas. Again, that kind of came out of the surveys where people rarely use transit for anything besides sort of recreation and other trips, rarely for shopping or to work. And so this one is focused to those results in particular. Next slide, please. Developing targeted campaigns for recycling material with the highest GHG reduction impact, paper, metal, food waste. This has a bit of an overlap, you'll see now with some of the other. Incentivizing recycling of construction and demolition debris, and using recycled materials in the construction, transportation, and other infrastructure. So I know the industry does a lot of that. If it rips up asphalt, that's very reusable, for example. But when grading large plots of land and what to do, with materials. So, any questions or
So just to throw this in there.
Yes, please, Commissioner.
This is what already happens right here in the city of Sedro-Woolley. So everything that we're putting in here is just reiterating something that we already have in place, which is good, which is fine. But all I'm saying is all this stuff has already been in place for quite some time. So anyway.
Yep. Again, as a comprehensive plan that's going to, be updated many years from now, I think there are technologies that will come into play, because again, I've seen them in other locations at scale that could fit under this. But we don't have to dream that up today. So just be open
No,
to it.
we already got it done.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm telling you. We already have it done. And that's what makes this place an amazing place, because we already have all this stuff that we're saying that's a plan or a goal. No, we already got it done.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, now as I see this, we focused on construction and really didn't talk about food waste, which is its own little thing. So we'll give that some thought, because, yeah, all of a sudden, the two policies only speak to a small part of that goal. Yes, Commissioner.
Sorry.
We're already good.
Sorry to go back one, but under GHG 5, I was wondering if it would be appropriate, since we only had the one policy there, to put something there about non-motorized, I don't know how you would word this, but I'm thinking like, as we talked about earlier, bike lanes, bike paths, if that.
I think if you go back to 4, I think.
Okay,
it's
okay,
there,
so
exactly.
it's addressed already
One
there.
more,
Okay.
sorry, go back, Woody, please. And it's, nope, you were right there.
Oh, right,
Create a safe,
3.2.
well-connected, and attractive
Okay.
bicycle. Yeah.
Okay.
That one gets a little orphaned because it is directly taking on that you do not own your transit system, right?
Okay.
Remember, Commerce set out guidance to apply to all sorts of communities, some of which have their own. So
Okay.
they would have far more
Okay.
under that one. So I think we'd like to leave it, to kind of fit with where Commerce is going to look for it. We know it's orphaned, but it really is just encourage with the people who actually run your buses.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
actually have 2 policies when we went to the CPAT, and they suggested that it just become one comprehensive policy, so that's why it's kind of on its own.
Yes, yeah, so now it stands out as its own, but I think, I would suggest we just leave it alone. That's where Commerce is going to look for it. And yes, there's lots of great other, because people aren't going to ride transit if they can't get to it. They're not going to drive their car and park it there, right? That's silly too. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I wasn't sure how broad the term transportation system was, if it was specifically, we're talking like buses, or if you could wrap something else in there, but it's already been addressed regardless in 3, so.
Yeah, perfect. All right, let's go on, please, to the next slide. This is about, we did this one. Sorry, because we went backwards. Let's go on to 7, please. All right, so 7 and 8, same page. Maximize solar access of site design where practicable for new solar-ready residential. So again, incentivizing installation of solar panels on buildings, as well as within or over parking areas. So, and that's however one incentivizes, right? So, doesn't always have to be financial. GHG 8 is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector. So some of these do cross over, but this is about prioritizing and promoting public transit expansion and use through coordination of land use and transportation planning, prioritizing converting public fleets to zero-emission vehicles. This is about what the city owns now. So this one's actually thinking about, maybe not this round, but the next time you go to replace city vehicles, it may be time that, that ZEV technology and the infrastructure is there. So it's really about considering that in purchasing decisions, for example. But GHG 8.3 is implementing multimodal transportation planning to reduce single occupancy vehicle dependency. You're all doing that because it improves circulation, right? It removes other ills, so to speak, in the community. So we acknowledge that you're doing a really good job on that. All right, next slide, unless there's any. And that's the urban tree canopy. Trees. We are pro trees. Increase tree canopy cover to boost carbon sequestration, reduce heat islands, and improve air quality, prioritizing overburdened communities. And this is about maximizing tree canopy coverage in surface parking lots. Again, could be an ordinance, could be reevaluating an ordinance that you have. We're not dictating that, but that could look a lot of different ways. And then improving and expanding urban tree canopy to maximize or conserve carbon storage. I know other communities, just throwing it out there, not suggesting this works for you, but an example, because I think that's what we've been trying to talk about, is every tree over a certain size that you have to take down for your new house, you have to buy 2. One you plant on your property, one you donate to the city, and the city dictates where it goes. And that, I know that's a price that's added to cost of a house, but I'm just saying that should you get to that point where you want to encourage that kind of, hey, you've taken down that really great tree, again, we're talking big trees, not saplings, but you donate one to the city, and the city actually says, well, we want them along the school, or we want them along the wherever, kind of thing. And so that is what other communities do to improve and expand that. So, yes.
Kind of a random question, but have you ever seen tree replacement programs or incentives for, because that can be cost prohibitive or difficult for people who don't realize that street trees are really important, but then, you know, it gets too big because the wrong tree was planted there, it jacks up the sidewalk, they have to go fix the sidewalk, and then it's like, well, we're gonna be fixing it again in 5 years if we don't remove the tree. And then, you know, you have your policy in place, okay, now you need to plant 2 trees to make up for that, and you gotta buy those trees.
Yeah, yeah,
So-
no, believe me, trees, work with a lot of communities in a lot of states, and
So look at my face right now, okay? This is not a smile. I've just seen batshit crazy stuff when it comes to trees. Yeah, it depends on where you go. There are so many jurisdictions that I gotta tell you, they are over the top on stuff. That it's a danger to the public, but it's also like a cost prohibitive kind of thing that I just sit back and I apologize for that comment. Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah, we're defensive of our trees. We love our trees.
absolutely.
That's all good.
Then you start
It's
talking
okay.
about defensible space and not having a tree within 200 feet of your house, and people go crazy like, no, no, no. You know,
Just
so
saying.
you're going both ways. Exactly. You've got fire hazards,
Just saying.
safety. You've absolutely, trees are beloved or hated or whatever. Anyway, so left them vague. I think that's it. Next slide. Thank you. Thank you for hanging in there, everybody. We're here still. Any other questions?
So maybe we can talk about schedule a little bit on this. Council will see this next. I don't have that date in front of me, but it's in June. Oh, thank you, good. And then you had mentioned bringing a revised version of this back with comments. We can talk about how to do that internally and what the schedule is for that. So there would be, let me see. I think I did set a special planning commission meeting for the first week of June. I'll have to go take a look again. I didn't bring that with me. Oh, you brought it. Nice. Thank you. June 10th. Okay, we'll be looking at economic development and transportation. Maybe June 17th we can bring the climate one back. I'll have to work that out, but then you get another chance at this. So
What did you say about June 10th?
June 10th, we're going to have a special meeting, and we'll be covering economic development and transportation. That'll be the second review on the transportation.
Okay, I'll be out of town, but
Okay.
that's
It's
all right.
okay. I got you covered on that.
Thank you.
So, not for anything, we so get how important our 10-year comprehensive plan update is. And by the way, to my consulting group, you guys are doing a great job. If we come across sometimes, you know, me, I can be a little bit difficult. I'll be the first one to tell you. But the point is, because I care. And I absolutely know what the importance is of this 10-year update and the commitment that everybody here is showing. So all I could say is one thing. Thank you to everybody. I'm all good. And I'll be at every meeting we possibly can outside of today, but I had screens in front of me that I could actually look at what we're talking about, and that's all. But again, thank you from everybody, because it really is important. We're setting a whole course of where this city's going to go in the next 10 years. And it's really, really, really important that we get it right. Thank you.
One
You
more
want to make a
thing.
motion to adjourn, by the way?
One more thing, and I am so sorry, I forgot about this, and it was right here in my notes. I wasn't quite sure where to bring it up, but in the very beginning of the basically, on page 4 there, the very intro there, the climate resilience and GHG emissions reduction sub-element. So are both of those considered one sub-element, or are they separate sub-elements? Okay, so sub-elements, we also, I think, failed to mention the GHG one back in chapter 1 when we broke down the different chapters. I remember I had a correction because it said elements, but then it only mentioned one, and I think that's probably because this somehow got accidentally deleted. So. Oh, well, both. So here on page 4, it references climate resilience and GHG emissions reduction sub-element, singular, and then. Correct, because it only mentions climate resilience, no mention of GHG. I looked back, unless I'm, so, yeah, so I just, because I kind of looked here and I was like, well, do we only have one? No, we have 2 in there, so.
That's a great catch. I'll bring that back for you.
Thank you all for your patience tonight and your comments and your feedback, and thanks to Facet for your presentation here tonight.
You know, before we all like disconnect tonight, Facet, no, you guys are doing a great job. Okay. Also, got to be aware that the Danielle Freibergers of the world, we're all looking at every single detail because we get how important it is. And again, it's thank you, everybody. So, Tom, we'll talk to you soon, and we'll see you guys next week, I guess, right?
Thank you too. Oh,
our next meeting's going to be what? Next.
thanks for all your thanks, Joe, and all your comments. And I think there's no more comments or questions. Yeah, I'm going to get to that. We have to finish this at 8:53, and now we're going to hear from Nicole.
Yes, just a quick thing before we end our meeting tonight. Last meeting, there was some question as to whether the chair has a vote. So I had Nicole help me take a look through the Planning Commission Rules of Procedure and Robert's Rules. Lovely big book here. So the Rules of Procedure were actually pretty vague. So it's, as we know, the action is taken by a majority vote of the members present and voting. Any member may abstain from voting. A tie vote means a motion fails. Okay. Then it goes on to say the Planning Commission meetings shall be governed by the guidelines and procedures contained in the current version of Robert's Rules. So we looked into Robert's Rules, and I will read it verbatim. Joe, please let me know if you need any further clarification, because there's a lot of like in particular paragraphs in here that help to kind of describe it better. But it does say, so if the presiding officer is a member of the assembly, he can but is not obligated to vote whenever his vote will affect the result. That is, he can vote either to break or to cause a tie, or in a case where a 2/3 or majority vote is required, he can vote either to cause or to block the attainment of the necessary 2/3 or majority vote. Your choice.
Okay, that makes good
That
sense.
was kind of weird. So it's only happened once when I chaired. It's like we had a tie. It was like a 3-3, and it was like it was actually a land use kind of issue. So from what I understand, okay, it's like Joe Fournette, okay, has a vote, right? Whoever chairs, they have a vote. Okay, and that's it's not even a question. It's like simply that we got 7 or whatever planning commissioners that the chair, they have a vote. Again, I'm not the chair. So all I'm saying is that's why I kind of like it, because I got a vote, right? But at the end of the day, it's like, I believe the chair does have a vote. Is that correct or not?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so Joseph, you do have a vote, yes.
Yes. So I guess where you could use that authority is in the event where you have an even number of commissioners including yourself. And by voting, there is risk of having a tie where the motion fails. Then you could choose to abstain from that vote so that you know you're going to have a majority. But I've
Yes.
not seen that happen. So,
Yeah, it
it's-
hasn't
it's nice
happened.
to know the
only-
rules.
It's only happened
But-
once. It's only happened
Yeah,
once.
but back to Danielle saying that there were 6 people here and it was recorded as a 5-0. Would we amend that or just carry on from
We'll
here?
go ahead and correct
Yeah.
it, just with it being, we'll call it
Yeah.
a scrivener's error.
Okay. And also, I did a little research too, but only briefly, and it said basically I have a vote, I just don't have an opinion. I'm supposed to be neutral on
You
everything.
have you always have an opinion, by the way, yes.
Yeah.
But you do have a vote.
I do want to make it clear, it does go on to say, you cannot vote twice, right? So you cannot first vote as a commissioner and then try to break the tie or change the vote to influence the majority vote. Does that make sense? So you can't vote first as a commissioner and then second as a chair.
Oh,
So,
okay.
one time. Make your
So
choice
we're
wisely.
split 3-3, okay? You get the deciding vote. And it's only happened once in my experience.
Yeah,
And then I got overruled by council.
we're just clarifying something that came up a couple weeks ago.
Oh, yeah, that got tossed out, but I was like, why would you even want to do that anyway? But anyway. yeah,
Thank
it's
you
only-
for the
It's only
research.
happened once today. But I'm saying, yes, you do have a vote, very much so.
Yeah. I think I have one of those tucked away somewhere. Should read it.
Someplace.
But is there any other comments? And we can ask for an adjournment before the 9 o'clock hour. Nothing
I make a
else?
motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Fatisi, first, second? Me, you?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Freiberger, seconds, in favor of adjourning?
Oh,
Aye.
We're out of here. Thank you. 8:58.
Okay. We'll see you guys next week.